Today's webinar is brought to you by All Things Insights and sponsored by Metrics Lab. My name is Amy, and I will be your moderator for today's event. In just a moment, you will be hearing from the following speakers: Andrew Clark, Chief Strategy Officer of Humanaut, Justin Lagosh, Managing Director at SunButter, and Wayne Link, Vice President at Metrics Lab. And now, to kick off our presentation, I welcome Andrew, Justin, and Wayne. The floor is yours.
Great. Hi, everyone. Wayne, Justin, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
Glad to be here.
Cool. Let's dive in. Thanks, Amy, for the intro. So yeah, I think like good marketers, we want to start with the pain. We want to acknowledge sort of what I think probably many of you have felt. I know everyone presenting here today has felt a version of all of these pain points. And the first one, I think, is this feeling of having data, but not knowing what to do with it. Wayne, I don't know if you can flick to that slide for us. Perfect. I think everyone right now, the most common thing we hear, yes, we need more and better, higher quality data, but it's the insights that are often lacking. As Wayne will say, big data does not equal big insight. And in fact, most of our clients are awash in data. They're overwhelmed by the data, and they really need partners to come alongside them who actually have the time and the wherewithal and the engagement to help them figure out what to do with all that data. The next point is really just the reality that in a world of specialized agencies hired by a centralized brand manager, we often get a situation where these specializations are incredibly siloed. And in their silos, they've been developing a private, secret, sometimes incommensurable language between the two of them. And so what we often find is that creative agencies and research agencies are quite literally speaking a different language and using a different vocabulary, even if they're in the same room together. What about this one? Sometimes, frankly, they're just not interested in working together. So that's Wayne over on the left, and that's me on the right. I think that's the cliche. That there's not always even a desire to work together because of this adversarial relationship, and because it's not clear how their interests and incentives are actually aligned to truly collaborate. On this next slide, what that sometimes means, again, if we're honest with each other, is that often creative agencies take what we call a smile, nod, and ignore approach to research. There's often a mentality of, yeah, okay, wait it out. Let's let the researchers say their stuff. We'll interject a few questions. We'll smile, we'll nod, and then we'll get on with the business of making the advertising, which is why you came to us. This last point just speaks to the overall issue. I think often the research, it's not necessarily about the quality of the research. Often the research is great, sounds smart on the day it's presented. But because of the way that these relationships are often set up, the research agency presents, there's some questions, and then they're done. They collect the check. And often creative doesn't know what to do with it, doesn't know how to take those insights or findings and actually translate them into a creative object that the world sees. And I think this is compounded by the fact that often clients themselves are not totally sure what to do with it. There's a gap between the outputs and the creative action. And that crucial moment of collaborative interpretation has been skipped over. So I don't know, hopefully people on the call can resonate with some of these pain points. I'm sure there are many more, and we could probably spend the whole webinar just talking about the pain we all experience.
Yeah, and I would just add here that as a client, it is our job to really marry those two up and link them together. And not all creatives are strategic, and not all strategics are creative. And the brands, and especially SMBs, don't necessarily have those resources that understand and can drive action from the delivery of the research and translate that for the creative. So it's a collaborative effort. Everyone needs to be along for the ride.
So, for today, I mean, we share the pain points because the three of us all kind of chuckle at the stereotypes. But I think we as a team have actually overcome a lot of those stereotypes and a lot of those things that actually do get in the way of good insights and good collaboration and good brand building. So what we want to share with you today in the webinar is 5 rules of engagement. And what these 5 rules of engagement will provide for you, the audience, is, a better path to actionability. Now, for you researchers in the audience, it's not just about, strategic insights. It's actually about, creative insights too. It's insights for the creative people as well as your clients on the client side. Also, for clients, just advice on how to get more from your creative and research partners. And this is a struggle. I think that Justin has done a great job at bringing Andrew and myself together. And also there's just share with you just a more collaborative way versus the adversarial interaction among each of the stakeholders, which will lead to better brand growth. And then for the researchers, a challenge for us to rethink the way that we're delivering on our insights. And it's not just, I'm not talking about the methodology, I'm talking about the way that we deliver the insights to make them more actionable for our creative partners as well as our client partners. And then finally, we're actually going to show how we apply these rules, to the successful launch of, the relaunch of the SunButter brand. So before I get into that, I want to hand it off to Justin, who's going to share with you a little bit about the SunButter and the challenge that they gave to Humanaut and Metrics Lab. Justin?
Very good. So today we're going to talk a little bit about our experience, and we did effectively search out Metrics Labs and Humanaut and interviewed based on a perspective of needing to test and iterate and use research as a part of our positioning, our branding update on the packaging side of things, as well as create a campaign that actually led into product innovation as well around where our brand wanted to go in the future to become more of a mainstream product. If you want to go to the next slide here, Wayne.
Sure.
Meet SunButter. SunButter has pretty low awareness. We've been around for 18 years now. And so just to share some of our history, our product was actually developed and effectively branded as a solution for those allergy households out there, those that couldn't have traditional nut butters. Started off and grew up in schools and food service and onto retail. And what we found is we really grew a business to a certain point, but now we've actually pigeonholed ourselves into a niche solution-based product. And our goal for Wayne and Andrew was, how do we appeal to a wider audience? We really looked at the category and said, it's a $2.2 billion category. We're the small little piece of that category. How do we appeal to more households than just those that then have a need for our product based on food allergies, or having to send their kids to school that need a different product than peanut butter? And so we looked at our product and said, well, we do have health appeal. We do have some attributes and attribution-based selling we can do to a health food market. If you go to the next slide here, Wayne, we really focused on that. We called them almond butter enthusiasts, as we thought, that's as bold as we can be at our size. Is we're going to go after those almond butter users and say this is a trade up in nutrition and clean label for a value to what almond butter is out there. And so we sold it that way to the Whole Foods of the world and in the specialty stores. And we figured, almond butter in the subcategory is about 10% of the $2.2 billion category. So we said, hey, that's where we need to live if we're going to expand our brand. And really what we had found, if you go to the next slide here, Andrew, and I'll pass it off to Andrew here shortly, but we found that we needed to be challenged, and Andrew was able to challenge us with, well, why not peanut butter? Why wouldn't a peanut butter user have appeal to your product? And with that, I'll kind of let Andrew Clark with Humanaut here take you through our positioning.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Justin. Yeah, I think our earliest intuition on this was the need to not exchange one niche for another. as Justin described, SunButter was killing it in a small niche of allergy sufferers. And because of that, it had all the baggage of an alternative food. And the temptation in the past had been to target other smaller segments of the audience, say fitness enthusiasts. And I think a lot of the work that we did was premised on the idea and eventually uncovered and validated the idea that we needed to reach a wider audience with our story. And so really much of the research that you see following is trying to figure out, okay, how do we adjust the story to reach that mainstream audience as we move from, say, Whole Foods or maybe just one SKU in the Krogers of the world? How do we start to bring our full portfolio into places like Target? I think Target was a great sort of model channel for us, and that sort of masstige. We did need to premiumize the product, but it still ultimately needed to be accessible to the mainstream, because ultimately we needed to speak to all category buyers. So whereas we started with a narrow allergy solution story, very much focused on children, but a particular kind of children, there was an assumption that we would have to grow up the packaging, premiumize it, make it more appealing to the whole family, not just to kids. And while I would say that assumption was validated in the work, what we found is that we had to dial it back a little bit. And there was a temptation, as you'll see initially, to go a little bit too far in terms of modernizing this brand and turning it into this great millennial brand. And the research showed us to exercise a little bit of creative restraint. I think that's just one way that the research ultimately just helped us modulate the way that we were going to achieve this transition together.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Andrew. We had to validate and then revalidate, and we were able to catch ourselves a little earlier and not get carried away.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, well, if you take us to the next slide, I mean, just to paint a picture for you guys, really everything was on the table. Justin and his team were very trusting in saying, hey, we know we need to shift this brand, and we need a plan to get there. So the work started with positioning, rethinking the positioning in light of this new target. Brand identity work, packaging and logo refresh, and we'll see kind of how we nuanced that piece of the project, and then ultimately a campaign out in the world. And one of the nice things about the process was along the way we uncovered an opportunity to actually also help the SunButter team out with a new product launch. And all of that happened, I think, because we had this approach that was a plan, but it was also a plan that was built to change. It was a plan that was built to shift as we learned things from these successive rounds of strategy, creative production, testing, and learning. So Wayne, if you want to take us in, I think everything that you're going to see in these next, what we're calling these 5 rules for getting the most out of creative and research, sort of hinges or is a fleshing out of this thesis. And it's a thesis that I think is going to be non-controversial, but I think everything is about the execution. As Wayne said, this is less about changing our methodologies. I think there are going to be plenty of webinars today that are about the latest and greatest, better methodologies. These insights are all about the collaborative process itself. They're about the relationship. They're about what you might think of as the culture around research. That's where we think that we've found an edge and we've found a different way of doing things. But the thesis simply stated is that maximizing both research dollars and creative dollars depends on getting the right data at the right time, interpreting it collaboratively, and activating it creatively. So the right data, actually designing that research together and making sure that it's just enough research, always trying to get to that just enough 80-20. Interpreting it collaboratively, recognizing that interpretation is a team effort and everyone is responsible for their part in the act of interpretation. And then finally, everything hinges on activation. That interpretation needs to set up the creative in a relatively unambiguous way to execute successfulally. Also wanted to clear something up really quickly. Data, I think it's a tomato thing. Everyone has their camp. I'm unapologetically a data guy. Wayne's on the data side. Not sure about Justin, but anyway, just wanted to prepare you guys for that. We're talking about
I'm a data guy.
Fair enough, around number. Cool.
So let's get to those 5 rules.
Let's do it. So yeah, I mean, first off, this is kind of a no duh. It's one of those things that's more easily said than done. But I think everything hinges on a relationship of mutual respect and understanding. All the parties at the table need to understand that every party has its place, and they need to work to start to address some of those culture clashes that are inevitable. That tension that we talked about, that adversarial relationship, here on this next slide. This is the natural state. It's Voldemort and Harry Potter. I think I look more like Harry Potter. I think that makes Wayne Voldemort in this scenario. This is often the reality. Maybe not this explicit or this out there, but often there's a certain territoriality. And I think this stems from the fact that inevitably there's a bit of overlap between what a creative agency, especially if they have a strategy department, is meant to do, and what the research firm is meant to do. There's a certain overlap of services, and sometimes their agenda, unspoken maybe, are different. I think what we want is a little bit more like what's on this next slide, a true partnership, a partnership where each has their role to play, and there is a genuine and not token respect between the two. That's only going to come if we're actually engaging with each other, having conversations, and really thinking together from beginning to end about what the best design for the research program is going to be.
Just to add to what Andrew was saying, I know a lot of researchers when they talk about the creatives, the stereotypical responses, or what do you think of creatives? Researchers say, oh, all they want to win is an Effie Award. Well, of course they want to win an Effie Award, but at the same time, they also speak a common language with us. So at the end of the day, we all want our client's brand to grow. And that's the area where, both the creative partners as well as the research partners can join together to help the client out.
Totally. Yeah, and I think, I will say, I think, in many ways, the onus here really is on the client. We're entering into a relationship and a process that, frankly, if it's done right, is going to have a fair bit of uncertainty built in. We know we can start by identifying knowledge gaps, but there are going to be a fair number of unknown unknowns. And as we uncover new insights and new opportunities, we need to be able to adapt. And so the client needs to start by bringing the right players to the table and really doing their due diligence to make sure that there is chemistry between the creative and the research agencies, and that they are truly willing and engaged in the process that they're going to need to develop together in order to succeed.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, it's really important that as the client, both the researcher and the creative understand the end game to be successful. The creative needs to understand a strategy needs to understand the creative's approach to it, and research needs to validate so that there's no fights over who's right and who's wrong. You get those little pieces along the way, and it's the client's job to make sure that we follow those little tokens of advice along the way, and that ultimately it's the client's job to be successful with whatever is created. So not just because it looks great, we should know that it looks great and it's going to get accomplished what we need to get accomplished.
All right, so off to the rule number 2. Insist on both art and science. Really, you really do need both. You start to think about a brand. If anyone talks about a brand, everybody would agree that brand choice is a combination of what we call the emotion and the functionality of a brand. That the buzzword today is, system 1 and system 2. And everybody knows it's a combination of both. Yet you actually have to measure both. And one of the things that researchers have been able to do a lot better in the last decade or two is actually measuring emotional response. So, and the Metrics Lab is one of those companies that's also been able to do that. And the trick in that, and to make it actionable, is to really understand both. And, system 1 being fast, instinctual, emotional, your gut reaction, where system 2 is the more deliberate, the logical, the rational benefits. The challenge here, particularly to researchers, is to understand that system 1 isn't a question of what's best. It's a question of what fits best. And to best illustrate that, if I was to ask the audience what your favorite color would be, is it red, green, orange, yellow, blue, black, or white? You might subjectively tell me what your best color is, but if I was to ask you, well, now imagine a sunset. What colors or color best fits with a sunset? You would give me probably a different answer. What I'm doing is illustrating the point of, once I put it in the context of a situation, or we put emotions in the context of a brand, the answer that you get is that what is best fit. It's not that one emotion is better than the other. It's what fits best with the SunButter brand. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Andrew, who basically took our insights and then took the System 1 and System 2 insights and then used that to develop the new campaign for SunButter. Andrew?
And I think here you see a place where, this need to combine System 1 and System 2 at all stages of the research expresses itself just in the creative stimulus. So in this case, instead of just testing positioning stimulus, just looking through that System 2 lens, essentially words on a page, we layered onto that actual video. I think this is a product of having production in-house at Humanaut. And so you have this simultaneous thing going on where the cost of production, the cost and speed of production have just gone down so quickly in recent years. And similarly, the costs of research. And what that means is we can truly have production in-house. We can start turning ideas and words into creative objects much more quickly. And so very early in the process, even just at the positioning stage, we were able to take those positioning ideas, translate them creatively into videos. Now, were these ready for prime time? Not at all. But did they start to bring in some of those System 1 elements, the emotional appeal, the visual, the tactile, and even the taste elements? They definitely did. And so we found that this was a great way to really test a more robust version of those positionings while allowing for a concept that can more directly start to pull some of those System 1 levers. The only other point I would make here, Wayne, is that I think there's a danger because sometimes we take that System 1, System 2 idea and we apply it to the partners, right? So the creative agency, they're System 1, they're all about emotions and color and zany, right? And System 2, well, that's the rationalist, that's the research department. And in fact, what we all need to do is get better at combining both of those things in our practices. And the more that creative can acknowledge that System 2 stuff, and yes, the more that research can start to reckon with the System 1, then we can actually start to, again, speak the same language and truly collaborate. So part of it is just breaking down this, getting out of our own stereotypes and embracing both sides of our brains.
And I'll just add right here, it was super helpful and comforting and to know that we were mitigating risk by putting something out there to test the positioning and then collaborating together to go the right direction before you start dumping as a client very limited money you want to use as effectively as possible into carrying out a positioning and not getting to the finish line and going, well, that wasn't quite right. So it definitely was a different approach than I'd seen before and one that I really thought was effective.
So if we were to share kind of like a little bit of what we learned along the way, we learned that, first of all, that the new concepts that Humanaut came up with, it really just they hit it out of the park. So they did, the scores came through great. So if you're looking at the System 2, what the concept delivered, well, they communicated all the things that were the levers for the category. But the interesting thing that it also communicated was the System 1 type of positioning, which was around the archetypes of innocent and explorer. And the other interesting thing is that what Metrics Lab does is we just don't talk about the archetypes. We actually provide our stakeholders the specific brand positional words behind those archetypes, which again was very helpful in moving further along the product development cycle, and particularly when you'll hopefully see that in the advertising that we're going to show you later. But the interesting thing that came through here was two archetypes, one being innocent and the other one the archetype of explorer. And what was really cool about this was a SunButter really was fitting with this. The concept was fitting with these archetypes. And in addition to that, it was actually different from its competitive set, which was the perfect trifecta.
Yeah. I think one of the big takeaways here for us, there was a temptation on the creative side to maybe resist the innocent archetype. There was anxiety. We'd had some past research that Justin's team had done that said that maybe this sunflower is too childish. And so I think, one of the things that was really helpful here was that second archetype. I think we're always looking at Humanaut for tension, for ways, great brands need to be more than just, one idea. There needs to be another idea that provides a little bit of creative friction. And so bringing in that secondary archetype here was key so that we didn't end up just in some saccharine, sentimental Disney stuff with this brand. And we're able to bring a little bit of a more provocative and potentially breakthrough element by folding in some of that explorer mentality as well.
Yeah, it'd be hard to modernize by just having puppy dogs and babies in there. It worked well. It was comfortable, but you're right, adding that friction. And from our perspective, hiring a partner that's willing to challenge our traditional 18-year perspective, and I've been there for 13 of them, so pretty ingrained in that, and to challenge us to look outside of those things to create that friction that will still meet the brand meeting and standards and keep the equity, but yet give ourselves the opportunity to appeal to a wider audience was really what adding that archetype helped.
Yeah, and we can move quickly through this. I mean, this was the ultimate tagline that we ended up, but it really was an embodiment of this simple, innocent, happy appeal of the sun and the sunflower itself. And we'll see in particular when we look at some of the packaging research, how the research really did bring us back to that sunflower as it's sort of that no-brainer iconic symbol, not just of the brand. It turns out, SunButter had a lot of equity just in the sunflower shape, but also of that innocent archetype. It is this uncomplicated goodness. And so everything that we did with the campaign was ultimately about taking the sun as the emblem of that uncomplicated goodness and going out and telling that story. So finding ways to spread it, using some additional kind of humorous elements, and I would say too, a little bit of wit and a wink to package that up to appeal not just to kids, but to their parents as well.
Nice wordplay on spread.
So the interesting, now talking about our rule number 3 is to involve the creative and the creative strategy up front. And what we mean by that, is that typically researchers, whether you're on the client side or you're a research partner with the client, tend to work on the early parts of the new product development, process. And very often what happens is we bring the creatives in at the last stage. We say, okay, we developed everything. We developed the emotional elements. We developed the message. We developed, the packaging, the product. Okay, creatives, now create some, give us some great advertising. And very often, and this is, hats off to Justin for actually bringing both of us in early and throughout the process, rather than for research, maybe doing stage 2 and stage 5. We were brought in both in stage 1 and we're partnering throughout this process. And as a result of that, I think, what we're going to actually show you later on in rule number 4 and in the results, came through on that by bringing, the partnership in during stage 1.
And the earlier you validate as a client, the more efficient you are and the more money you save.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, save yourself from going down blind alleys until you have time to test it later. Yeah. I mean, I think the key here is creative involved on the front end, helping shape the research, the inputs for the research, helping to identify the most relevant knowledge gaps. I think just doing that. I mean, on the one hand, it's buy-in, but I think it's more than just politics and optics. I think it's also getting creative actually invested, helping them articulate the questions that need to be answered by the research means they're going to be that much more invested and engaged in the outputs. I mean, some of this is just the exercise of trying to figure out, well, what would a helpful output look like? What kind of insight are we actually looking for? And when creative collaborates on that process, as opposed to being brought in later once all the research is done and the research team is handing over those insights, means that we're going to bring a little more rigor and a little bit more of a demanding perspective on what really qualifies as a great insight. Because a great insight, above all else, has to be creatively actionable.
So, rule number 4, test early and often. Oh, sorry, did you have something to add, Andrew?
No, that's it. Yep. Okay.
So I know Andrew and I are going to go over this slide here, but from my perspective, from the researcher's perspective, if you look here down on the bottom part, which is the idea to launch. Research traditionally has been the screeners, the people that are convergent. They look at 60 ideas and they tell the client, of the 60 ideas, 20 of these things will work and get rid of these 40. And yeah, that's true. I mean, researchers should be doing that. But in addition to that, there's a lot that can be learned throughout the process. There's no one idea that's entirely good that can't be improved upon. And there's no idea that's entirely bad. There's probably elements of that you could borrow to actually make another idea even better. And so one of the things that we were able to do, Metrics Lab was able to do for this partnership, is as we went through the ideas and we went through the process, we identified things that were working and things that weren't. But more importantly, we were able to work with them to make the ideas even better, and therefore at the end of the day, grow the brand even more. Andrew?
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think before we look at actually some specific moments in the research, I think just to unpack the philosophy behind this overall approach, and I think all of it is made possible because both production and research have been democratized and gotten so much cheaper and faster. And what that allows us to do, and I think a lot of this honestly hinges on production itself. I mean, it used to be that to shoot a commercial, you're talking about $60,000 for the director. You're talking about, $150,000 even to get out of bed. It was so expensive, so slow, so unwieldy that you had to do a ton of research on the front end just to feel confident signing that check to put the deposit down on the production. But as both of them have gotten cheaper and faster, it's allowed us to actually realize what I think people in the research community have recognized as the ideal process all along, which really is an iterative process of creating, testing, and learning. And the added advantage of that, I think, is what you described, Justin. It lowers the stakes of any one round. And not only does it de-risk the whole operation cumulatively, but it also lowers the relationship stakes or the ego stakes too. We think about how to reduce that adversarial component. Well, man, if creative has everything riding on this one pass, this one go, well, they're not exactly motivated to listen to the research. We just have to be honest with ourselves about that. They're going to be more defensive. They're going to be more territorial. But if, in fact, they recognize that this is part of a sequence of much smaller tests, each with lower stakes, they're going to be that much more likely to engage. Not only that, they're going to be more likely to bring in a wide range of ideas, knowing that, as Justin described, some of those more aggressive ideas can be tested and validated. So it makes it that much more likely that a client's going to be like, all right, let's make it. Let's do it. Let's see what happens. And effectively, then it actually, often the research will give you the courage to actually take that more aggressive stance out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So as researchers, if we're going to really be the partner, that's going to, provide actionable research, we need to dig deeper. We need to step up to the plate. And there's a lot of great research companies that are now doing this, Metrics Lab being one of them. And what do I mean by digging deeper is, as we look into ideas and we look at the product development, is to look to see what's working, what's not, and how to make it better. And what we'd like to show you is an example of how we applied that to the SunButter case study. If you look at the bars on the right hand of your page here, when we evaluated the ideas, the conceptual ideas that Humanaut and SunButter came up with on the repositioning, all the concepts really did well, but we also did an exercise called Derived Importance, which identifies what's actually driving the appeal. And so the thing that came to the top was probably not surprising to anybody that works in this category is, it's all about the taste, dummy. And of course, that was the first thing. But what was really interesting and what kind of validated the way that we were going is what came right after the taste of where the kids would love it. And it's that the product was more nutritious than the other options out in the category, and that it had natural ingredients and it didn't have the bad artificial stuff. And this is really great and very encouraging for SunButter, because that was a perfect fit, to the concept. But what it also did is it gave us the focus that if we were going to introduce this brand, well, first of all, we've got to address the issue of taste, because a lot of people that were just becoming familiar with SunButter, the first question that they asked was, well, gee, it sounds interesting. I wonder what it's going to look and taste like. So it gave us that challenge that we really had to actually communicate that, and we did a great job. And Andrew and Justin will go into that, how we did that to packaging. But and then the other thing is, again, this the re-emphasis of what to communicate when we talk about the brand, both in the advertising and the packaging. Sorry, Justin.
I would just add here, Wayne, that for a brand stakeholder, this was validation that it's okay to step outside of the lane that we had built up, and that when we were actually looking at category users that were not specifically affected by food allergies, that it is taste. And we also understood that with low awareness of what our product should and might taste like and how it should be used for, that we weren't going to win on taste unless we changed our on-shelf presence and appeal and our positioning. So this validated to us that it was okay to step outside the lane. And initially, we didn't need to step in the middle of the derived importance here, which was just the attribute selling. We actually needed to explain, this tastes good, and you should understand why it should taste good. And in order to do that, we needed to rid ourselves of using the words alternative or substitute to describe our product, because the perception when using those descriptors, which you would use in an allergy basis, automatically are perceived as not as good as, must not taste good, which is the number one derived importance why people would buy it. So it really helped us add some insights there.
100%. Yeah. And Wayne, if you take us to the next slide, I think it's a great illustration of this other, from a design perspective, you can see that what we ended up with is an admittedly modest refresh of the package. I think it's a great example of research coming in and actually saying, if we should have actually shown you the first round of design, because there were some pretty things that were far more revolution than evolution. And what consumers told us was, no, that original pack is actually pretty good. It performed just as well, if not better, than many of those original designs. And that prompted us to reconsider the merits of the original package, make sure we weren't fixing what wasn't broke, and frankly, exercising a bit of creative restraint in the interest of what consumers told us they wanted. I think a lot of it does hinge on that point that Justin made earlier. Initially the take was, all right, this needs to be branded more like an almond butter. It needs to appeal to a foodie, natural-seeking adult. And as as that position and strategy got revised to, no, it's a pretty mainstream product, and if we should be competing with peanut butter peanut butter just as much, if not more, than almond butter, it had aesthetic implications for us as well. And so I think it was a good case of us not getting too clever, not getting too cute, but still ending up with something that we're really proud of and that did outperform the original pack just by bringing a refresh to the package, focusing on that core equity of the sunflower itself and starting to answer some of those questions that Wayne identified too. What does it actually taste like? Let's visualize the product. Let's make sure we're showing people that this thing's going to deliver on taste and is more than just a substitute.
So interesting. This is the just to show the audience. This is the new packaging line, and we really wish this was a great example of bringing those elements into the packaging, but also doing a lot of really good things that are on shelf. It has a nice brand flag. It uses the sunflower, but it also does a great job at actually communicating the differences between the flavors.
And I shamelessly put all these behind me.
That's always a good sign when a client wants to actually show the product. Yep. Well, why don't we watch the commercial? I'm gonna minimize the lead up and just let you watch kind of how this manifests itself from a campaign standpoint. And hopefully you guys can see we're unabashedly appealing to that innocent, while also bringing in a little bit of irony and cultural awareness for the grown-ups in the room.
Something happens when people eat SunButter. It's making them happy. That's because SunButter is made from deliciously healthy sunflower seeds, which are basically little sunshine factories that soak up the awesome power of the sun. And it turns out when you roast all those seeds and crush them up and mash them into a deliciously creamy spread that we call SunButter, you get bursts of health and happiness by the spoonful, or jarful, or pouchful. Now you can smack some sun on your sandwich or kerplunk it in your protein shake, because we think everyone could use a lot more sunshine right now. And maybe that little burst of sunshine will spread from your snack to your social feed. Or maybe that scoop of sunshine will brighten your morning Zoom call. Heck, that sunshine on your sandwich might even make its way from your mouth to the morning news.
And going into the weekend, we've got sun. Oh, it's going to be a sunny weekend. Back to you, Bob.
Now that the sun comes in spreadable, edible form, there's no stopping it from spreading happiness all over the world. Are we saying this little jar of crushed up sunflower seeds is a conspiracy to make the world a healthier, happier place or something?
Come on, not everything's a conspiracy.
Cue dancing sun? SunButter! Spread some sun!
This week, coast to coast, it's going to be SunButter with a chance of sandwiches.
Cool. So maybe this last point we can make quickly, because I know we're waiting for the moment of truth where Justin reveals whether any of this did anything at all. I think this point I think is a little bit of a challenge maybe to the industry at large, to start to rethink how we structure our engagements with agencies, recognizing that this collaboration that we're after, it's cumulative, it's built on relationship. And in today's kind of project-based model with hiring specialist agencies to come in at certain moments and then go away, doesn't really cultivate that kind of long-term relationship where we do start to develop a shared vocabulary, where we do start to develop a shared knowledge base that we can continue to cash out for clients. And so, I think there's an opportunity to rethink the ways in which we write these contracts and these engagements, with partners kind of riding all throughout the course of a project in order to continue to build on those iterative learnings and hopefully get us closer to a place where we can actually activate all those learnings.
So from the research perspective, one of the things that I think we at Metrics Lab always challenge ourselves to do is to get past that first level to the third level of what we call research engagement. The first level being, okay, and a lot of research companies do a good job at this. We collect data and we analyze it versus a control or a benchmark, and we tell you, the what. Did it work or did it not work? But that's not really being a partner. That's just being a research vendor. If you really want to be a partner or a trusted advisor, you need to move to that second and possibly the third level, which is the second level being the why. What's the why behind the what? What's working, what's not working, how to make it better. But if you really want to get to that third level of being a trusted advisor, it's now working with the stakeholders to ensure that the insights are acted upon. It's not just giving them recommendations and saying, oh, well, that's my report, and then just moving on to the next project. It's actually working with them and, staying a little later and making sure that they really understand it and working with them, throughout the process. So again, to the bottom line, did all of this work. To do that, I'm just going to hand it back to Justin, who's going to share with you some of the results.
Sure, and now no more spoiler. So the payoff of this has been tremendous. We are in about just over a 90-day window from the campaign launch, but we have some really encouraging insights to share and performance metrics to share. And really going through this process, rebranding and relaunching the brand evolved into innovation. And really what we found is this chocolate innovation truly brought the opportunity to expand users into our brand franchise that would have never tried and have told us through research they would have never tried our product, but they would try the chocolate, which then again could pull them into the brand franchise. And so far we've got very strong retail acceptance with the new product we launched. We first shipped into wholesale distribution in March this year. First sell-through in the register was in April this year, and we're planning to be in over 4,000 stores that have accepted us by the end of September this fall, which is really encouraging for a new item launch for us. The packaging refresh paired with the campaign, was effectively ran across every video platform socially that you can think of, pretty much everything but broadcast. With our limited media budget. But we did have a very effective media spend and really drove our awareness numbers up. We did some traditional polling of category users pre and post campaign, and our awareness grew by 1.7% in the first 90 days from 9 to 10.7%. Our have purchased in the last 30 days grew from 4% to 8.5%. And our would recommend went from 3% to 8.5% in the first 90 days of the campaign, which are very encouraging indicators early on. And then also, what was most encouraging as a owner of the business from a managing perspective of the P&L is that in the past 13 weeks, we've shown an average of greater than 20% year-over-year weekly growth until U.S. MULO data. And that was going up against a year of 2020 where we did 10 to 15% of our overall business in 3 weeks from March 10th to March 24th through the register. So that's inclusive of that. We've grown above and beyond that. And as you can see, the overall $2.2 billion category did not fare so well in the past. This is the past 23 weeks. 5% growth for SunButter over almost 11% decline of the category. So fighting those headwinds and the big mountain decline, this campaign, the positioning, the rebranding, the validation, and the research has definitely driven us to some really, really strong success thus far.
Yeah, I love this slide. I can just look at that forever. I think that's the killer slide. I mean, bucking the category trend in that way so dramatically is pretty exciting.
That one's going to be it's a really good indication, and it really after the amount of work put in by all parties and the teams involved, that's good to see. And then this is an illustration of the last 13 weeks of weekly sales through the register. So again, there was some pullback starting out later in 2020, but this is a nice trend to stay on, and hopefully we keep adding weeks like this, and we finish the year strong.
We are all out of time today. I'd like to thank our wonderful speakers, Andrew, Justin, Wayne, and all of you for joining us. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.